All right, we're doing it. Jason, welcome to the World Class Dads podcast. Thanks for being here, brother.
G'day, mate. How are you? Thanks for having me on. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, I'm excited that I could steal a little bit of time right in the middle of the season here for you. But I'm excited to dive into the topic of fatherhood with you because I know that while bowling is your career and you're damn good at it, you also have a strong passion for fatherhood. So I think we got a lot to talk about here.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to it, mate. Like I said.
So for the folks who are tuning in who don't know your name, would you mind just giving a little bit of background on yourself and what it is you do professionally?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Jason Belmonte. I'm from Australia. I am a professional bowler. So my job is to knock over 10 pins on a lane. And I've been really fortunate to be able to have done that all across the world. And I've gotten pretty good at it. So I'm really, really lucky that I can do what I love. And bowling is something that I was around my entire life. Parents built a bowling center when I was just a little boy. I was actually only a few weeks old when they built a bowling center. So got into bowling from pretty much my first breath and have got a massive passion for it. So yeah, I'm very, very lucky. On the professional tour, I've been even more fortunate to have won 25 titles, pro titles, including a record of 13 major championships. And I've also had a lot of fun traveling the world. So it's been a really, really awesome ride. It's not over yet. I'm talking like it's over. It's not over yet. I want to keep going.
Just in the middle of it.
So, and that's been in a nutshell, in my life. It's been traveling, it's been bowling, it's been trying to break records, it's been trying to provide for my family, which, as a bowler and a traveler is sometimes difficult because, well, you're leaving home quite a lot, but it's one of the sacrifices that I make to do what I love and to provide. So hopefully we'll get into some of this throughout the chat today, mate. And yeah, you can ask me a bunch of questions.
Yeah, for sure. So have you always, I guess, just to drill in on your journey a little bit, have you always made kind of your career in bowling, or was there a point where you were, doing some other gig to pay for the bowling?
Yeah, no, I have had two other jobs in my life. The first was I worked at Blockbuster back in the day, but I saw the writing on the wall. I knew that place was going under 10 years later, so I left Blockbuster and I worked for my dad at the bowling center. But then Dad fired me, and maybe we'll get into that story later on. So I was about 16, nearly 17, when I was making pretty good money, especially for a 17-year-old. And I thought, if I can do it now while I'm 17 and cover my bills, I get to travel the world, do what I love. Like maybe I can do this forever.
And that was the money you're making off from your bowling career.
That's right. So as you go through your career, you earn money. You can get endorsements and sponsorships. You can do appearances. You can do lots of different things. And I've even started, growing a personal brand around me. The name, the Belmo brand. Actually, I don't know if you can see, but I'm actually wearing one of the items today. So, building a personal brand around Belmo. I love to be an entrepreneur. I love creating things and building stuff and marketing them. So that's kind of been my side hustle while still trying to be, the best player in the world.
Yeah, no, that's unbelievable. Unbelievable just success that you've had, with your career. And obviously starting at such a young age, you were doing that well before you had kids. So how many kids do you have and what are their ages? Like when did they come into the picture and throughout that journey?
Yeah, I have 3.5 kids. So I've got 3 that are walking around now, and there's one it's going to be walking around in about 5 months.
Oh, that's awesome. So, congrats.
Yeah, thank you very much. So it'll be a total of 4, and then I'm done. I've done my part overpopulating the world. Someone else can carry the torch now. So we fell pregnant with my eldest. She's 11 now. And it was quite funny. I was living in Europe, competing on the European tour with my wife, and we had these ideas of like, you know what, we might just continue to travel through Europe. We'll jump from country to country, changing where we're living, really experience a lot of the world. So we were in France, and then we went to Sweden, and then while we were in Sweden, she said, "You know, the next place I want to live." I said, "Oh, where do you want to go next?" She says, "I'd love to live in Australia again." And I said, "Oh, you want to go home?" She's like, "Yeah, I think we're going to have to go home." She goes, "I'm pregnant." So that was really exciting. Flew all the way back home soon thereafter, and we haven't left since. So, yeah, 4 kids, well, 1 on the way, 3 living, and they are absolutely everything I could have asked for.
I love to hear that. And so, but that's obviously a big shift. So traveling Europe, bowling, having her with you, your wife with you as you're competing, to, having the home base back in Australia. Now you're obviously competing currently in the US. There's a good distance between those 2 locations. And then before we hit record, you talked about how with COVID, it's even more complicated with quarantining and things like that to travel back and forth. So maybe even 2020 and 21 are a bad example, but how has just that travel component that is a natural part of your job, especially being based out of Australia, impacted the way that you approach your relationship with your family and still prioritizing them?
Yeah, mate, it's honestly probably the most difficult part of what I do. The
Mm-hmm.
the first moment I take the step out the front door and I'm on my way for, sometimes up to 3 months, 3.5 months away from home, it kills you. It absolutely kills you. And you try to look at all the positives, like, you're going to do something that you love, and you're going to provide for them, but you also miss so many things. And it's not even the big things. It's not even just the birthdays or, the public holidays or what. It's the, hey, I lost my first tooth, or hey, Dad, I kicked my first goal today. And it's just all of these little things that pop up throughout the day. Well, those 2 events aren't necessarily little in the eyes of a child, but I'm just saying comparatively, what you could potentially miss, those little things just build up and they eat at you. So it's really, really difficult. I think the biggest thing is when I was before children, I used to always think, oh, when I have a family, I'll just bring them with me, or, we'll see each other very regularly where, I'll just, if they don't come with me, I'll fly them to wherever I am and we'll see each other really, really soon. But I've come to realize that they've got lives that they want to live. My wife is a nurse. She also, for a long period of time, owned her own clothing boutique, and she's got her own friends. The kids have their own stuff. They got activities. They got school. They got all these little things. And it kind of, was a big slap across the face to be like, hey, you know what? This is not just your life, right? This is their life as well. So yeah, it'd be nice to just bring them over to you whenever you want, but it doesn't work like that. So we've had to really kind of dial in and tune into communication. Now it's a lot easier when you've got video calling and texting, and which obviously makes it somewhat easier. But that's probably been the biggest key, is making sure that we are really committed to the communication, because the time zone changes make it really brutal. For example, I was up late, well, every night really, but last night even more so. My children had music, and then they had dancing. So I was like, hey, Dad, we're not going to be able to call you straight after school. We're going to have to do it after our activities. Okay, so that's 2, 3 o'clock in the morning my time. I got to make sure that I make that adjustment, to be able to speak to them. And that's the same thing on their end. When I'm going to be really busy competing and I only have a short window, it's, hey guys, I need you to get up just a little bit earlier because tomorrow Daddy's got to go bowl, and we make it work.
Yeah. No, I could totally see the challenges of that. And I think that you are probably a more grandiose example of that situation that a lot of dads face, especially a lot of the dads who listen to this show, driven guys. They're, professionally ambitious, but again, have that focus on, being there for their family and being awesome family men. And so with that, just success and that driven mentality, oftentimes travel is a component of it, maybe not to your degree and across the other side of the world. But what are some of the things for you? And I asked this even for myself when, I'm in sales, so I'll be traveling once this whole COVID thing passes more again. What are the things that you do when you're home to try, or even when you're away, but just to try to really continue to foster and grow those relationships so that even though you might not be there every day of the year physically, you're still building those relationships and creating those bonds with your kids?
Yeah, it's a great question. Only in the last probably 2 years have I decided to try or implement kind of like a new thing with my children. I am obviously very, very close with not just my kids, but my parents, my sister, her kids, my immediate cousins that live in the same town as me, and they have 2 or 3 kids for each cousin. So it's a very big Italian family type lifestyle. And it's always been, when you see one, you see everyone. It's very rare you get the opportunity to take one niece out or one nephew out, or, take one child of your own out. And what I was noticing was when I came home, because I'm gone so much, I would want to give all of my time to all of my children as often as I possibly could. But what would happen is, as children tend to work out, they can dominate your time. For one child can dominate your time depending on what we're doing, or maybe their mood or whatever it was. And there would be days where I felt like, I didn't really get a chance to, hang out with my son today. Like, I had my youngest daughter who's 5. My son is 10, nearly 10, he's 9. So it's like, I didn't really get a chance to go motorbike riding with my son because we went bike riding with everyone. That's fine, but I was really missing out on those individual connections. So Kimberly and I, my wife, she said, well, why don't you just take one of our children somewhere on some days? So you're really giving a full day, or at least a few hours of full commitment to them, and a donation of time to them. And it's been really, really great. It's been the ability to connect with them on a level that I haven't been able to do when it's all 3 of them running around wanting to go in 3 different directions. And I'm kind of going, oh, let me see you do that. Let me go do that with you. Okay, let's draw here. And then it's like, dad. And you're like, okay, I'll be there in a second. And then you leave the situation. So I could understand if you are a professional father who is away from home a lot and have multiple children. I really can understand and sympathize with those fathers where it's like, yeah, but I want all of my time to go to my children. And I'm here to say, it's actually not too bad if on some time off, you just take one of your multiple children and go for a walk, go to the park, watch a movie with that child, but then obviously making sure you're reciprocal to the other children equally. So, if I go for 3 or 4 hours with one, I make sure I go 3 or 4 hours away with another.
That's cool. No, I love that. And I think it's a great concept just to be able to really get that one-on-one time and know, okay, I'm with you right now. I don't have to have any other distractions. And then there's other times that I've got scheduled for the other little ones. So they'll get their turns.
Well, I will tell you, when you're traveling and you're away for 3-4 months and you have no child responsibilities at all, right? Like, I can wake up when I want. No one's waking me up in the middle of the night. So when you go home, it's nice to be able to just take them one at a time.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier for me to like adjust back to it. I'm like, hey, you know what? I'm going to leave you 2 with mom, and I'm just going to take this one for a second because it's going to be a little easier.
Yeah, no, that's a good point as well. So when you are home, are you still, I'm sure you're still honing your craft and practicing and doing all the things you need to do to make sure you're on top of your game. Are you dedicating kind of work time in the alley to work on your craft, or is that kind of bringing the kids with you? Kind of what does that look like when you're in the off season?
Yeah, it was another period of time of adjustment for me to understand how best to manage my time when it came to also working on my career.
Mm-hmm.
Because as an athlete, you know, as much as I would love to be able to just turn the switch off, you know, you got to stay sharp. You know, you've got to stay fit. You've got to work on your game. You've got to be better. And what I was finding was I would be gone. I would come home, and the bowling center that my family owns, it's also its own business. So
Mm-hmm.
there were just times throughout the day which made sense for me, but not for the bowling center. So then I would have to rearrange my schedule based on the schedule of the bowling center, which then meant there were periods of time in the day where, you know, I couldn't pick the kids up from school because I wanted to train, because it was a quieter time at the bowling center. And then it was just a bit of a mess, because I started to feel super guilty. I started to feel like, hey, I'm here at home and, you know, I'm not picking the kids up. Like, you know, my wife, she has to juggle all of this while I'm gone. I kind of wanted to make it my responsibility for those little things, those little jobs,
Mm-hmm.
to be able to take over and say, you know, honey, I'm home and I'm going to do all these things. You don't have to quickly leave the store or leave work early to pick up the kids because I'm here. But it wasn't working out great for my training, because I would cut training sessions short to make it on time, or I would end up sometimes looking at my watch, getting delayed from something else and going, I'm just not even going to have time to go. So I would skip a day or two, and I wasn't comfortable with that. So we ended up deciding that I would do all of my training when everyone went to bed. So, you know, the kids go to bed. I mean, I don't know what the usual bedtimes are over here in the US, but we try to get them in a little bit earlier. So, you know, my 5-year-old, we hope to be in bed sleeping by 7:30.
Okay.
And then the older children, it's closer to 8:30. And if it's a late night, it's after 9:30. But so I would wait, do all the routine stuff for bedtime, and then, you know, give my wife a kiss goodnight. She would go to bed, and then I would go into town to the bowling center and train from, you know, 10:30, 11 o'clock through to the early hours of the morning, and then get up with the kids, you know, for school preparation and breakfast and stuff like that. And I'm a night owl. Like I have no problem staying up till the early hours of the morning and getting up early. So that doesn't really bother me. So it really started to kind of work. I never felt guilty. It's a sacrifice on my side because, yeah, I mean, I can't go to bed early because I got to stay up and train, but it works for everything else. So you kind of take that one on the chin just a little bit and go, yeah, no worries. I mean, as much as I do love staying up or can stay up, you know, you still need to sleep. You still need to make sure you get your energy. So
Right.
It's just one of those things where you wake up a little bit more tired. Well, you have a second cup of coffee for that day. You're like, no worries. I'll just, give me 7 shots of coffee in that one. Will
Yeah. Well, no, I think that, again, it's just one of those examples that is very specific to your career in bowling, but can be extrapolated across to so many other examples. I mean, I know with this podcast, for example, with editing and posting and emails and all of that stuff, on top of being there as a dad and doing the things I need to do there and show up for my wife and working a full-time job, it's that same thing. It's like, all right, our life got flipped on its head when we had a kid, but how are we going to make this work? And it's just getting creative with your time to really fit it in, because most of us have more time than we think we do if we really examine our schedules closely. But yeah, sometimes you just gotta be at the bowling alley at 2:00 in the morning to make it happen.
Yeah. You know, I think the other thing that was really handy was, and I never used to be like this ever. Like I never really used to be completely organized, but be organized in a weekly schedule or sometimes even a monthly schedule. So I've come to realize that I can juggle my stuff. Like I can rearrange a meeting. I can change a time. I can stay up a little later. I can get up a little earlier, and I can just make my schedule work. But I've come to learn that the kids' schedule, it is set in stone. You sign it, the contract's in blood. It's like, no, dancing is Wednesday at 4:30. No, it's not at 5:30. You can't change it.
Yeah.
You can't move it earlier. It's 4:30 every Wednesday, and that's when it is. And it's like, okay, so I gotta, I'm trying to talk to a sponsor about a big deal, and I'm telling them, hey, can we move our meeting because dancing's at 4:30 now. So it's like, it's so funny to me because I'm like,
right.
I give you everything to these children, and you would not know what to do if mum and I just decided to leave you. Like you wouldn't know what to do. And yet you control our lives more than anything else. You determine where I go at what time all the time.
Yeah, the most demanding boss in the world, just setting your schedule for certain aspects.
Yeah, except the difference is you're paying the boss.
Yeah.
Right? Like imagine if your boss said, you know what, I want you to work every weekend early. Like you're not going to actually sleep ever. Like we're going to make sure someone wakes you up really early in the morning. And oh, by the way, you still owe me money for doing all of this. You owe me the money. You're like, what kind of a relationship is it?
Yeah. And I will not be appreciative until I'm 30 years old.
Yeah, right? I'm going to yell at you. Occasionally, I may even say I hate you. Yeah. And you're just going to have to deal with it. You know what you're going to do? You're going to give me a kiss on the head and say it's going to be all right after I tell you I hate you. It's like, this is a terrible way of interaction.
Yeah, well, yeah, we're really convincing guys out there to have kids, but
let's flip a gear and talk about the good stuff, right? Because there's so much of it. Right?
Oh no, I know, and it's funny to laugh about it because those are actually the experiences that you can joke about, and it sounds so terrible, but you would give a million of those, shitty interactions for the positives that you take out of it. So let's actually talk about that a little bit. Like having kids, how has that just impacted your life and impacted the way that you just look at life inside of bowling, outside of bowling in general? How's it enriched your life?
Yeah, I mean, it's wild, right? When you have your very first child and you get a chance to hold her or him, and you realize what you've just created, and that you kind of have these little moments of really quickly nostalgic, like going back in time in your own mind, going, I remember growing up and what it was like, and and I was really fortunate. I had a beautiful family, a loving family, and a really supportive family. So there were so many moments that I cherished with my father and my mother, and now you're holding your own, and you just have this like, I can't wait till we do all these things. I can't wait till we get to do all that. And, we're going to have these relationships together that I hope that I have with my parents. And, I'd say this all the time to my family, like my parents, my sister, even my wife. I love you guys, right? And I would do almost anything for you, but I would do anything for my children, right? Like, and it's very difficult to truly explain it to, someone who hasn't had their children yet or doesn't want children. That's a different story as well. Right. But when you have finally experienced it, and then you remember hearing people say like, I would die for my kids. And you think, really? You'd die for? Like, yeah, I'd die for them. So when you get to experience that for the very first time, it's like, wow, this is a pretty powerful emotion. And then as they're growing up and you get to teach them things or talk to them, or even, sometimes like one of those teachable moments that what happened was bad, but you're able to convince them, hey, saying those words to those other kids is not nice, or, doing this to your sibling, it's not nice. And then seeing the interaction with them and the penny dropping, going, oh yeah, I understand now, right? Before I didn't know, and now I do. And then you get this reassuring hug from them to say, thank you. I don't know, to me, those kind of little moments, those educational kind of, the penny dropping, right? The epiphanies that happen with children, you get them so often as children because you're just learning the world. So every day it's a new, I didn't know that's how that worked, or I didn't know you're supposed to do it like that. So it's a really remarkable feeling to be able to interact with them on that kind of level. And as they get older, I know I'm rambling on here, but as they get older, the tone of communication and the topic of conversation it's incredible the way that it evolves. Like, my 11-year-old daughter now, it was only a few years ago that we were talking, still very childlike topics. And now at 11, she's asking me huge questions about life and about, the universe. And she's asking very, very specific questions like, hey, Dad, why do we revolve around the sun? Why does that happen? Right. And you're like, hey, well, let's work this out together and let's explain what I know and maybe we can research it. It's just this, there's no way my son will still ask me about, video games and sport, and he hasn't got into that world. So I'm seeing the progression. Like, I'm like, oh, my daughter was at that point at one point in time. And now she's gone on to, why do you cry? Right. She'll ask me these very deep, questions. Yeah. And I'm like, honey, you cry when you say things like that. Baby. Yeah. It's so sweet. So it's like, that's another part that I wasn't really truly expecting to enjoy so much, right? The evolution of conversation is fascinating to me.
Yeah. My daughter's only 13 months, so I'm excited to get into some of that stuff as time goes on. But you talked about how you grew up really in your parents' bowling center, picking up a ball when you were, barely able to walk and getting into it. Has that been the same with your kids? Have they been interested in bowling?
Yeah, not quite, because my parents were working at the bowling center for their job. So when I wasn't at school or at home, I was at the bowl because that's where my parents were. So for me, bringing them to the bowling center isn't we're going there every single day. It's because daddy's got to work and you're going to, bowl or play your arcade games and run around. So now it's a very specific times that we go. They bowl in a competition themselves, an afternoon competition, which, I love taking them there to compete. My son, Hugo, is probably more, he's more in love with the game than my daughters. So we're starting to, very, very, very recently, have we started to train together. He wants to bowl with me in training. So there are some moments where I'm not bowling late at night. Now it's a little bit early. It might be, just before dinner or just after dinner. And, I'll take him for a bowl and we'll train together. And that's a really special moment for me that I'm hoping, that he's kind of taking the memory snapshots as well. But yeah, my kids use the bowling center to them as pure, it's a luxury. This is what we get to do because daddy's really good at it and our grandparents own it. And it's nice, but it's not full on like it was for me. I mean, I'm not even joking to you. Like, I spent more time in a bowling center than I did my own house. And that's including the hours of sleep that I would get of an evening. It was just mum and dad work so hard. They work long hours. The bowling centers close at 10, 11 p.m. Sometimes, and they're there at 8 a.m. working it. So that's where I was, right? That's exactly where I was until they went home. And I wouldn't change it for the world, but I certainly wouldn't expect my children to have to deal with all that.
Yeah. Well, I think I saw on Instagram that your son at 9 bowled over a 200. So he might be chasing your heels here. Not too long.
I'll tell you a funny story. So yeah, the score of 200 is a huge milestone. And he reached it. He's quite young to reach it. He bowls similar to how I bowl, and he likes to wear all of my shirts, and even like the shirts that I used to wear when I was his age, I still kept some of them, and he loves wearing those. And so he bowls his 200 game, and he's super proud, and he's kind of strutting around a little bit saying, oh, I got my 200. And then, I bowled a practice game and I was like, I think 190 something, but if I can be honest, I was working on a few things. Okay. So I wasn't trying to score a high game. And, he looks at me after 5 minutes after bowling his 200 game, and he gives me the nudge of the elbow. He goes, hey, you need to pick up your game a little bit there. I'm bowling 200s over here. And I just burst out laughing. I'm like, pump the brakes here, bro. Pump the brakes. All right. You've bowled 200 in your life. And now you're giving me a little grief for a 190 game. I'm like, relax, son. It's just awesome. It was a really awesome moment.
That is hilarious. That's cool. I know like LeBron, he's trying to play in the NFL with his son Bronny. You guys can be the same way. The PBA, you might have two in the league at once.
That would be wild. It would be absolutely wild if I have to bowl against my son. I wouldn't know what to do, because who I am as a competitor on the lanes, I am fierce. I do not want anyone else to win, and I will give them everything I've got to the very end. And then you're bowling against, your son, or, in LeBron's case, you're playing basketball against your son. You're like, do I dunk on him? Like, do I do that? Or, do I miss the layup so he gets the rebound? Like, I would probably be the same way. I'd be like, I could strike to win the major championship, or do I let my son be? Then you got to start thinking, but if you let them win, then there's a part of you that knows they didn't achieve it, right?
Yeah.
They didn't achieve it because you helped it happen. So I don't know. Let's hope it happens. And when that day happens, get me back on your podcast.
We'll do it.
How it all went down. All right. Although I'm probably talking now like, I'd be beating him easily, and it's probably going to be the other way around. Like the kid's going to be like, should I stop striking?
Should I let Dad
so I don't
win?
embarrass Dad anymore? Like he's so embarrassed right now. I got to like slow down a little bit.
It's so funny. So we just had a conversation with a gentleman named Robert Glazer, who's an entrepreneur on the podcast a week or two ago. And he had the same debate, except it's driveway basketball with his like 17-year-old son. So the stakes are much lower, obviously. But he is of the opinion, he's like, I will not let him win until he beats me out of his own accord. And then he'll know he earned it then. So it'll be better for him. But he's like, since he turned 11, he has not touched me on the basketball court. He's like, but he's right there. So
that's awesome. Just swatting like these kids' balls.
Right.
Out of the no dunking for you, no layup for you.
Yeah, not up in here. No. So I did want to circle back to you getting fired by your dad that you mentioned in the intro, because I feel like I'd be just wondering what that story was for the rest of the day if I don't talk about it.
Yeah, no worries. So I was a teenager, and I was working at Blockbuster, and I was working for my dad in the bowling center, and I started to do a lot of domestic traveling for bowling back home. And the tournaments were always, Saturday, Sunday. And where I live in a small country town, kind of, it's in the middle of nowhere really, but it's about 4 hours inland from Sydney. So Sydney's the closest big city that I live next to. It's where the airport is. So I would have to take sometimes a Friday night off or afternoon to drive down to Sydney, which is a 4-hour drive, jump on a plane to go from Sydney to, say, Melbourne or Brisbane to compete in these weekend events. But, my schedule for work would be sometimes, I'd be working a Friday night shift, or I'd be working a Sunday shift or a Saturday shift or whatever it might be. And I started bowling a lot of these weekend tournaments. And my dad, he would cover my shifts. And the first few tournaments, he was more, I think, proud that I would go and compete. And, I had an opportunity to do this. So, I'd jump on the train, and this was before I could drive. I'd jump on the train, go to the airport, fly, come home, I did really well. He's like, yeah, cool. It was really busy on the weekend working your shifts. But that was all right. I got you, son. I got you. So you do that for like a year straight, pretty much. I probably didn't get to a full year of doing it. And it starts to wear a little thin. So one morning I walk into work. It was like some random Tuesday, and I walk into work, and usually Dad and I, we would have a conversation like in the front counter. We would just talk about whatever happened the day before, or what we got coming up for the day. And this time I heard him say, "Hey Jason, can I talk to you in the office?" Like, talk to me in the office. Like he's never just brought me into the office to talk. What's going on? So then I started thinking, like, I don't know, is he going to say something like, he's selling the business? I was thinking like all the worst possible things. And then he sits me down and he says, listen, there's really no better way to do this. So I'm just going to say it. I'm like, okay, what's going on, Dad? Everything all right? He's like, yeah, you're fired. And I went, what do you mean I'm fired? I live here. Like, you can't fire me. And he's like, son, I'm working all of your shifts. I love that you're competing, but you can't keep working here. I'm not working 6-7 days a week anymore. I want the weekends for me now. do I leave today? Like how abruptly are you fired?
Yeah.
Do I get 2 weeks notice? Like
Can I come back?
Situation? And he said to me straight up, he goes, "You're bowling on the weekend, right?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "All right. So don't come back in after the weekend. Just have a sleep in on Monday morning. Don't worry about coming in." I'm like, "Oh, okay." So I remember leaving the bowling center. And this is the second part of the story that I think is an absolute godsend. So I remember going to the tournament, coming back, and I remember feeling just what am I going to do? Like I make money when I work, and I make money so I can pay for my travel.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a huge part and portion of how I want to do what I really want to do, which is bowl. But when Dad fired me, it meant that my Monday through Sunday was now completely free.
Mm.
And it meant I wasn't tied to work. There wasn't a responsibility to having to go to work. I could work on my game, and I could really hone in a lot of these skills and I think it's kind of like, when you're a chef for large hours of the day and you come home, what's like the last thing you want to do when you get home is cook meals.
Mm-hmm.
So it was the same for me in bowling. When I was working heavily at the bowl, I didn't want to practice, because the first thing I wanted to do after a 10-hour shift or something was like, I'm getting out of here, right? I'm spent. And then I realized I was still bowling well, but how much better could I get if I actually came and trained every single day? Because now I don't. So that's exactly what I did. And then immediate results were seen, where before maybe I came second or third, well, now I was winning by hundreds of pins. So, the checks started to roll in a little more frequently, and the prize money was getting more and more. And that was kind of when I was like, maybe I need to go overseas and chase even more money, even like chase the different currencies that are better than the Aussie dollar.
Wow. That is a really fascinating story. That's awesome. And that it turned out to be a blessing to
absolutely. He takes credit for it to this day. Yeah, still does. Yeah. You're where you are right now because I fired you. You know that, right? Like if I didn't fire you, if I was a loving, good dad and didn't fire your son, you'd probably still be working for me.
Oh, I love that. I love it so much. Jason, so we got a lot of young dads listening to this, just getting started, or maybe even some soon to be dads. Is there any advice that you have that you would impart to a brand new dad, or if you could go back in time and tell yourself right when you were having your first child that you'd tell that new dad?
Yeah, I think if I could go back, I would say it's okay to make a mistake, right? It's okay not to know something, and it's really okay to ask for help. I think all too often, and maybe the culture in the US, and again, I'm only assuming that the majority of your audience is American, but back home there is a true stigma about the male being super strong, and there's no tears coming out of my eyes, and I can handle everything and anything you put on my plate because I'm the dad. Mm-hmm. And I've come to realize that dads are vulnerable. Dads are they're hardworking. They work incredibly hard to provide for their families. If they are the breadwinner of the family, but at the same time, we have a sensitive side, and we are confused, and sometimes we don't know what the answer is to provide more or to look after something or to educate. And I've come to realize, not just with my own older, like my parents or my uncles and aunties who are a little bit older, but talking to mates, like actually sitting down with your mate and saying, hey, we're in the same boat. We've both got young kids. How are you handling this? How are you dealing with that? Or what do you do? And just creating those relationships on a really deep level with your friends to share in a common interest, your own children. It really, really helped me. When I probably, to give you the most obvious example, was I remember Kimberly was working and I was looking after my third child. So I'd already had 2 kids at this point, and my third child just did not want to eat. I mean, didn't want to eat. And it was the whole day. And I am stressing out. I'm like, my wife is going to come home and I'm going to have a child that's lost like 5 kilos already. This child will not, and she was only very young. She was only about, 13 months old, like the same age as your child. And I'm like, why won't you eat today? And it was stressing me out. And I remember just saying, hold on a sec, ask someone, right? Like, ask someone if they've experienced it and what it is. And, I had the opportunity. I called one of my mates and said, Sylvie, she's just, dude, it's been all day. Like, she hasn't eaten breakfast. She hasn't eaten lunch. It's almost dinner time. She hasn't snacked. I don't know what's going on. Why won't she eat? And he's like, mate, like, just convince her to eat by turning food into a game, right? Like, make her find it as not she's doing what you want her to do, but she's going to want to do it. So I'm like, oh, okay. So we did. I found a way to turn it into a game, and she ate. And I'm like, oh my God, this is the biggest relief of all time. But I know if I didn't reach out and ask for help, I would have waited till my wife came home. I would have been in hysterical. I would have said, I can't believe she didn't eat all day. Is this bad for her? What's going to happen? No, my other children did this. So reaching out, asking, it's no problem. If anything, it probably shows a lot of maturity in you and the willingness to learn. It's I don't know. I would tell my younger self with my first and second child, like, it's totally okay that you know nothing, and that this is a brand new experience for you, but you've got a lot of people around you that might be able to help. You just gotta reach out.
That's great fucking advice. I mean, I think it's very similar here in the States. There's this pride amongst men and just this culture that of not being vulnerable. And I think that there's a lot of conversations starting to happen, trying to change that, but it's deeply ingrained. I mean, if you look at the past couple of generations, we're coming off of just, the greatest generation and just these guys who just stomached so much trauma and just dealt with it. I'm a man, and it's something that's going to take some time to kind of overcome. But the more vulnerable we can be as men with one another, the healthier we're all going to be mentally, and the better it's going to make our lives in those in that situation you shared and so many others where you have a tribe of, or even one guy that you can really lean on in those tough moments. So I appreciate
the other thing that I realized really quickly was I'm not the only one, right? Like,
right.
Wow, this is happening, or whatever my experience or emotion was at that time, and having the ability to reach out to groups of people. And now with social media and the internet, you can really find groups of people from all walks of life across the entire world. And you can see, wow, there's a lot of people that are experiencing. So there's nothing wrong with me, right? It's not that I'm not strong enough to handle this, because look at all these other men who have experienced something like this and have created a community to help each other through it. So that was the first thing that I really, really appreciated understanding when you did reach out. It's, I would say something like, oh man, I don't know what to do in this situation. And a mate would be like, oh yeah, me too. I'm doing the same thing, man. I don't know what to do either. So now you've found like someone who has a common problem. Right. And then together you may meet someone who has a common solution that they also experienced it. Now you're kind of like, giving your buddy a fist bump, like, yo, now we can go home and try this and see if it actually works on our kids. And it's like, it does, it works. All right, let's move on.
Yeah, right. How thick-skulled are us men where we think we're the only person in the whole world who have these problems? It's like, oh, every single dad ever has faced the same thing. That's right.
Yeah. Oh, you wouldn't understand. That's the best line. Oh, you wouldn't understand. Trust me. I'm almost certain I will understand. I'm almost certain.
I love it. Jason, if people are just really digging this conversation and they want to learn more about you, follow along in your journey, what you've got going on at home, but also on the tour, where would you point them to learn more about you?
Yeah, I think the easiest one would obviously be your big social media handles, Facebook and Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and they're all pretty much at J Belmo. Otherwise, you can just go to my website, which is just jasonbelmonte.com, and that has all the links to the social media there. It gives you a little bit more info about who I am, where I'm from, and what I've been able to achieve on the bowling lanes. So feel free to hit me up on social. I'm pretty interactive with my fans. I try to communicate with them very regularly, and comment back and like posts and stuff like that. So don't be afraid. Come say hi, and yeah, check out my website.
That's awesome. And you've got the Belmo brand, right? So what
I
kind of
do.
stuff, you've got the shirt on, what kind of stuff do you have there that people can check out?
Yeah, so I'd like pretty much everything you can think of, from pants to shirts to hoodies to hats to even mugs. You can get mugs with the
Nice.
with the Belmo logo on them. And what we're actually doing now is, I'm a bit of a sneakerhead, and I love collecting shoes. And so with my Belmo brand, I'm kind of adopting a lot of the sneaker culture. Things where limited items, super rare items, like, I have some 1 of 25 design shirts, and then I'll autograph them. And even doing like super surprise stuff. You might just buy a regular t-shirt, and then in the mail will come a super rare, super limited autographed, momentous occasion shirt that I wore on a TV show somewhere. And you'll just get that as a gift for free. And it's kind of just doing things that are a little bit different, different in the bowling world, but incorporating, the sneaker culture
Awesome.
into bowling. So it's kind of cool. Yeah.
Yeah, that's super cool. So we'll make sure that's all linked up in the show notes. And Jason, honestly, just thank you so much for sharing some of your time here, sharing some of your journey and your perspective on family, fatherhood, and the whole shebang. So we appreciate you being here.
Absolutely, mate. I really appreciate it. And to all the dads listening, trust me, boys, you got this. It's all good.